Hey everyone, it's Mr. Southern coming at you with a video about my Unit 3 FRQ. That's a practice version, by the way. So we're going to go ahead and talk about it. It's straight from code.org. They basically wrote a ticket tracker FRQ. This is a pretty good indicator of like how well you understand one-dimensional arrays, and it gets closer to what the AP exam expects. So it's a good one to start with. Okay, first things first, we basically have to just cut to the chase. We have a one-dimensional array that's created, and I'll show you the example that's given in part A, where essentially all you have to do is you have to take a look at the various ticket prices that are sold for the movie theater, let's say, and for whatever reason they decide to go with maybe dynamic pricing. But some of the tickets are $3, some of the tickets are $2.45, etc. Basically, your main thing is you need to find which one of these are going to have a value of zero. So they want to find out in part A how many tickets are free. So that's what you need to do. Now, before we get there, there's a whole bunch of kind of code written, but also not filled in all the way. Here's the main thing you need to pay attention to when you look at this ticket tracker FRQ. The main thing is trying to tell you, hey, we have just one class here called the ticket tracker, and that's where you're going to go ahead and write your methods. So it's all within the same class. We have an accessor method called get free that we need to write. The constructor is already made, noting that the tickets is as you can see here, and when they declared it, tickets is a one-dimensional array that holds all the decimal values. So I know that because I see the square brackets right there. Okay, so the constructor is all written correctly. It localizes the values for tickets or to ticket tracker object that's going to create. They give you a precondition and postcondition. Just a reminder, precondition just means, hey, what's going on before I execute the code, and then post or what needs to be true, and then postcondition is going to be what's going to be true after the fact. Well, before we actually look at the code and do something, basically what it's saying is, hey, you're going to have a one-dimensional array and its length will always be greater than zero. So in other words, there's always going to be some value in there, or at least it's going to have more than one element in there. Sorry, one or more elements in there. There we go. And then the post condition tickets is unchanged. This is just basically my interpretation is, hey guys, this is an array. It is not an array list. So if you went through the array list unit and you came back to this FRQ, you would know that arrays cannot be modified. So if it has 10 elements when it's being created, you can't add or remove elements from it. Array lists you can, but arrays you cannot. So that's how they're confirming that this is just a one-dimensional array without waving a big flag and saying, hey guys, this is a one-dimensional array. Don't use any of the stuff you know about array lists here. Okay, so it's a very more subtle way of doing it. Okay, so we're going to write get free. So let's start with that first. Then we'll deal with part B, which is to find the average price. Okay, so what I try and tell students to do is we need to understand what is the game plan, what is the strategy. In other words, what's the algorithm we want to implement when we're writing this code. First and foremost, what I'm going to know is I try to use my rubber duck if I need to, that handed out in class, to talk to it and really sound out like, what do I want the code to do? Remember, computers are incredibly stupid, but they can do one thing at a time and do it very quickly. So when I'm traversing when I'm accessing or traversing a one-dimensional array, let's assume we're going to go left to right here. You'll notice that essentially this is just an example. So we don't know this only has 6 ticket prices. But remember what we did in class. I went ahead and I'm going to go ahead and label the index values for all of these. So the first element would be 0. The next element would be 1, right? Then we'd have 2. I'm just trying to label these just to like, again, if I had this as a piece of paper, it'd be much easier, but I'm going to just type it because my handwriting is awful. And then we're going to go ahead and label all this in red, just so you know that I'm working on this stuff. Okay, so I have my index values there. Remember, I'm going to access or traverse through a one-dimensional array by first looking at the first element if I want to, evaluating it, doing something with it, and then moving on to the next value. So in my head, what I'm thinking is if I can only look at one element at a time, what I need to do is I need to target and find, is this going to be $0 or is it not? If it is $0, then I'm going to go ahead and add 1 to my counter, my tally mark, if you will. If it's not $0, then I don't need to worry about it. I don't need to do anything else, right? So you can see when I get to the index number 1 or the second element, that is $0. So That's a bingo. That's a hit. So I'm going to say, hey, if that ticket price is equal to 0.00, then I'm going to go ahead and add 1 to my tally marks, right? So that's kind of the idea there. So I'm talking about all this because then I don't have to write it out for you. And I'm going to go ahead and change my text into red just so you know what I'm working on. So I can also write comments, right? That's totally okay to write. And I'm going to say, well, what's the first thing I want to do? Well, the first thing I need to do is I need to write some sort of way to count the number of times the free ticket prices come up. Sorry for all the interruptions. And as a reminder. Okay, so the lovely announcement stopped. So now what I'm going to do is I've set my counter variable to 0 because when we start counting, we always start counting from, well, we're basically going to add 1 to this every time I see a price of a free ticket. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bust out a for loop, right? Because I cannot traverse through a one-dimensional array without having my for loop. So at least I can use a while loop, but we've learned for loops this entire unit. So let's just go ahead and stick with it. So I want to start index value to be 0, and I want to run this thing till I get to the end of that tickets array, right? So tickets, whoops, dot length. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a concatenation, or not concatenation, but an increment at the end, if I can type, to go ahead and add 1 once I'm done with the loop. Then the question is, okay, so now I have the ability to work my way through the array and traverse it. Now, as I kind of, if you listen to my words earlier, I said, hey, I'm going to evaluate, hey, whether or not this ticket price value is going to be equal to 0 or not. And let's just do 0.0 to be safe. Okay, so I'm just kind of filling in some blanks here, right? So if element is equal to 0. Now, there's a couple things we need to pay attention to. Recall that in order to access that element, we need to use the index value that we're on. We're going to start with 0. So how we're going to access a singular element in an array is to type in the array name, tickets in this case, and do the bracket index. Okay. This is a mistake that some of my students are making. When you're evaluating an if condition, basically, you're evaluating this condition. If this is true, basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to add 1 to my counter that I just made there, right? So it adds 1 to my counter if ticket price is free, basically 0. And it's in decimals, so I just put 0.0 if I wanted to. Okay, so I can go ahead and do that. This is the mistake people are making. Remember that it's natural to be like, oh, I'm just going to use an equal sign because in algebra, through calculus, and everywhere else, we use an equal sign to say, hey, solve for this, find that. Are these two equal or are they not? In coding, it's a little bit different. The equal sign is an assignment operator. So if I kept it as is, it's going to go ahead and assign, say, that first element of tickets a value of 0.0. We don't want it to do that. We want to evaluate, hey, are these two values the same or are they not? Or these objects, I should say. If we're using string, I'm going to use the dot equals method, but since we're just dealing with numbers, we're going to use the double equal sign, and that'll work just fine. Okay, so then I have my counter updating. Go ahead and close out that if statement. Go ahead and close out that for loop. And then finally, we want to return the count. So don't forget that if you're ever confused, remember to look at these. I think it's called the method signature. Is there a data type there? If it's not void, then you better have the word return come in here. Okay. So that's that. So there we go. If I keep going down, now let's talk about average price. So here, what I need to do is I'm going to go ahead and basically traverse through the one-dimensional array. And you'll remember that to find the total of anything, we have to add up all the elements. And then to find the average, I'm going to take whatever the total is and divide it by the number of elements there. There is a big plot twist here that a lot of people are probably going to miss. Okay. And it's right here. And I'm going to go ahead and highlight just so it pops a bit. It says the average price method should not include free tickets in calculating the average price of a ticket. In other words, if you look at our example, it's telling you that when we find the average of all of these numbers, ignore the zeros, ignore the free ticket prices. So I'm going to find the average of 285, 125, 335, and 470. So in other words, we're going to divide by 4, not 6. So pay attention to that. And furthermore, they throw in one more thing, is you have to use the get free method to receive full credit. So if I don't do that, then I'm not going to get the full credit, and then that sucks. Because you could do this without, if you could satisfy ignoring the zeros without using the get free method. But specifically, they want to know, hey, are you able to call that get free method? Do you know what to do there? And so that's what we're going to do here. Okay, so to type in, not that you have to have a curly brace, I think for the AP exam, I'm going to go ahead and type it anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and write this method. First thing I'm going to do is so in my head, I'm thinking I need to find the total, and then I can find the average, right? And make sure to omit the zeros and use the get free method. I think it was the lowercase g. So those are just some things I'm reminding myself. And again, they're comments, so I could write skibbity toilet for all anyone cares, and it's not going to matter. Okay, so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so I need a way to find the total and return it and find the average. So I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and declare not int. I'm going to do, yeah, my total should be double, right? Because that's going to be, and if you're ever confused, look right up here. We haven't learned about casting and rounding, but the data type is going to be a decimal, right? So it's double, and it's going to be double total equals 0.0. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and declare that and initialize it. Perfect. And then what I'm going to do after this is I'm going to go ahead and figure out, okay, I need to traverse through the one-dimensional array. So again, I'm going to bust out that wonderful for loop, okay, and go to the end of the array, and then do my increment at the end. And then what I'm going to do is, do I need to do an if statement? You could, but remember, we need to use the get free method as well. So what I'm thinking is, remember, get free, which is what we coded earlier, is going to go ahead and return the number of free tickets. So if get free in this case, if I run get free, if this was actually my one-dimensional array, then get free would return me the number 2. Okay. So what that means is I can use this to my advantage, right? Can't I just find the length of the array, which is 6, and then subtract whatever get free spits out, and then boom, I'll have the ability to ignore the 2 free tickets there. So that's what I'm going to do. So if I run this thing this way, I don't need to do an if statement, right? Because in this case, all I'm doing is total. So I'm going to do total plus equals, and then we're going to go ahead and do tickets bracket index. So you could totally do that and then close out the for loop. And then we're going to go ahead. We haven't returned anything yet. So let's go ahead and write the return. And in this case, what I can do is I can go ahead and return whatever the total is divided by, right? Because total is going to, so what the plus equals does, just as a reminder, it's going to take a running total of each element of the tickets array. It's going to add them all up, which is cool. So it's going to go ahead and find 2.85 plus 1.25 plus 0 plus 3.35 plus 4.7 plus 0. Now you'll be a little bit scared because I'm including the zeros, but at the end of the day, it does nothing to the total, right? There's no impact. I just have to make sure I divide by 4. So what I'm going to do here is when I do total, I can just divide it by, you guessed it, the tickets dot length, but I have to subtract out the 2 free tickets, which is going to use the get free method. Okay. Beware here, there is PEMDAS in play. We're doing total, and we don't want to do total divided by tickets dot length and then subtract 2 later, right? So I'm going to go ahead and engulf all of this in a parentheses so it takes care of the difference between tickets dot length and whatever get free returns. One other thing I'll point out there, get free is a method that I'm looking to call. I get a little bit nervous when I just bust out the get free method just randomly. It's an accessor method. So I need to use the array to use the get free method. And then now this will work. Okay. I just need one more curly brace, then I can be done, right? There we go. And that's that. So doing this allows me to have all this information, and we're good. Okay, so some people out there, I'm not one of them, love enhanced for loops. So how can I change this regular for loop to be enhanced for loop? I'll show you how. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and write a for loop. Okay, get that started. And I'm going to go ahead and declare. So essentially, if you're using an enhanced for loop, we have to use the same data type and another array, one-dimensional array. That's going to essentially be a copy of the tickets array. So what we're saying is for each element of tickets, let's go ahead and dump it into use copy as a one-dimensional array. So in this case, if tickets is 6 elements long, guess what copy will be? It will also be 6 elements long because this enhanced for loop is going to go ahead and go through each individual element of tickets and make a copy in copy. Now what I can do here is, again, I could just use copy, and we're going to go ahead and do total plus equals copy. That's it. There's one other issue too. Let me just make sure I haven't messed it up because do we have another accessor method? We do not. Let me just see. Get free. Do we have a get price? There's no get price, but this should work just fine. Again, I'm not a big connoisseur of enhanced for loops, but this should work. And then we're going to go ahead and close out the for loop. And then I could do the same thing here, total divided by tickets.length, and that should work fine. If you're ever concerned about enhanced for loops, I would just say go ahead and use a regular for loop. Why roll the dice on that? So I'm more comfortable with this. I get it takes a little bit more coding, a little bit less efficient, but should be just fine. All right, let me know if you have questions, and see you guys soon.